Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We have been all NBA today talking about the latest action from the playoffs, but now I want to switch it up a little bit and talk some NFL. While we were on the show yesterday, we had the breaking news that Zach Wilson, the former number 2 overall pick for the New York Jets, has been traded to the Denver Broncos. Have a little bit more details on what specifically went on in that deal. It was Wilson being traded along with a 7th round pick in exchange for a 6th. So just about the minimum a team could trade for necessarily in terms of a pick swap. Meanwhile, the Broncos do also add a player in Wilson who is more than likely probably an asset that has run its course for the most part in terms of being an actual starting caliber quarterback. But at the same time, they add to their QB room here that is pretty short-handed, just Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci in the room going into yesterday at least. Now they add Zach Wilson. I don't hate Jarrett Stidham as a quarterback necessarily anyways, so maybe he ends up as the starting quarterback, but either way, their franchise guy is not currently in the room, which does sort of dive into a deeper conversation surrounding whether or not they address that need in the draft, specifically in the first round, where they have been talked about as a team that could potentially trade up. They have the number 12 overall pick. Before J.J. McCarthy really started making his rise to what seems like he's going to be in the top 5 potentially, then McCarthy was being slated around that 12 pick of a potential pickup there. Michael Penix Jr. could also fall in that range as well. It seems like Bo Nix is falling out of the first round as a whole. I mean, if I'm the Broncos, and I'm not saying in the first round, but if he's available in the second round, I would maybe even be willing to move up a couple picks to go get him, as long as it doesn't mean giving up too much. I feel like you can't really roll out with that quarterback room for next year. Zach Wilson, if he is ever going to be anything, it's not going to be a day one starter in Denver. By the way, just one other detail on the deal that I forgot to mention is the fact that the Jets and Broncos are going to split his salary for the upcoming season. Can't imagine his 5th-year option is going to be picked up, so this could just be a brief landing spot for Wilson, or he could end up, potentially, if things behind the scenes, because again, I don't think that he's going to be at least the day one starter, but if things behind the scenes go well, maybe he works out a little bit of a deal for himself, as the Broncos do seem like they have a little bit of at least retooling, if you want to call it that. Now, maybe they're not, completely... They're not a complete disaster here. I don't feel good about the team necessarily at all. Everybody points to that win streak during the middle of the year and says, oh, Russell Wilson, he was playing a lot better and was sort of getting himself into shape. The turnover differential in that stretch of winning games was very much not sustainable, and we saw that as they sort of fell out of the picture later in the year. But that being said, they were in the playoff picture for a little bit there. They have Sean Payton, who is going to be a Hall of Fame head coach. So I'm not really sure what direction the Broncos are going to go here. Again, number 12 overall pick. Are they going to take a quarterback in the first round? I don't know if it would be, at least just for, satisfying the fans for a bit. As a Patriots fan myself, who in 2021, that same year that Zach Wilson was drafted, the Patriots took Mac Jones with the 15th overall pick, which felt good because there was at least something to look forward to for the Patriots after coming off of a season where Cam Newton was clearly dealing with some type of shoulder injury and their pass game was just horrendous. It's at least exciting as a fan to have somebody, could he end up being the future? I just feel like when you're looking in this scenario, and again, you're looking at probably the 5th quarterback off the board, is it really worth it to, make a not smart gamble on a quarterback that late in the first round just because you want to look better on paper? Who knows, really? Definitely up for debate. I feel like the Broncos, they have other situations going on. The Cortland Sutton deal where he's not showing up to voluntary workouts right now. He wants a more guaranteed deal. I like Sutton a lot. I feel like it would be in their interest to pay him, but I guess we'll just see how the Broncos choose to handle all of this. But from the Jets' perspective of this deal as well, this is just something where they needed to kind of wash their hands of this disastrous situation that happened with Zach Wilson that I definitely don't want to 100% put it on him. There was a lot of dysfunction surrounding the Jets. There was the story that came out, I believe The Athletic put it out, about sort of what went on behind closed doors in the Jets locker room this past season, at least, when Zach Wilson was sort of thrown back into the starting role. But one way or another, whether you want to blame the situation or not, there is some point where it was just clear that Wilson wasn't the right fit for the Jets, and that, he's a player that really gained a lot of steam headed into that draft during the process itself with the pro days and with some of those throws that he would make sort of, rolling out and throwing it deep again without wearing pads in a much quieter situation. But Wilson, during his first handful of years, just was never the answer for them. And again, I think for the Jets here, they were in a situation where having him in the room. Now, if things were perfect last year and Aaron Rodgers was fully healthy and he was able to sort of take Zach Wilson under his wing, maybe that things could have played out differently there. But then it sounds like Rodgers sort of distanced himself from Wilson once he ended up getting injured, and that relationship that we saw them building during, preseason, and if you watched any of Hard Knocks last year, it was fixated on the Jets, and it seemed like they were sort of getting along. That just never panned out, and Wilson was put into a very difficult position last year, I think. But all of that to be said, Wilson is, I think it's going to be very hard for him to resurrect his career from being labeled as a bust going number 2 overall. And really, when you look at that 2021 draft class, I just talked about Mac Jones a minute ago, but he at least is sort of in pretty underwhelming company in general in terms of quarterbacks where, again, 2021 draft, they haven't even hit their 5th year options yet. And 4 out of the 5 quarterbacks that were selected in the first round are already on their second team with, Trevor Lawrence. He's going to get his contract this offseason, and the Jaguars are going to be set up with him for the future. But then it was Wilson, who's been all types of a mess. Trey Lance, who has hardly even played in the NFL. He was on the bench for his rookie season, ended up getting hurt at the very beginning of his second year in just his second start. And then Brock Purdy, the 7th overall pick, the Mr. Irrelevant in the 2022 draft, ends up stealing his job from him. And then Justin Fields, who we feel like there is some potential ceiling with him, but at the same time, some of the late game turnovers and some of the decision making, the inability to be an elite passer has held him up. He was just traded this offseason as well. And, Mac Jones, who I also feel like could have been at least a solid game manager quarterback that could have held a job for a bit there if it weren't for the disastrous situation in New England. And I do feel like that is a little bit of a theme when it comes to that 2021 class and how NFL franchises should look headed into the 2024 draft, is that really, I would say that Wilson, Fields, and Mac Jones were all thrown into very bad situations from a coaching standpoint and from a I wouldn't even fully say pressure, because I wouldn't say that, Justin Fields was facing an immense amount of pressure headed into his career, but I would, for both Wilson and Jones, I think that playing in those types of markets, the Jets wanting to finally hit on their guy, the Patriots hoping that they had their replacement for Tom Brady, which was never going to be the case, especially, being selected where he was, and the offensive playmakers really in all three of those situations from Wilson, Jones, and Fields. Now, Trey Lance, he was injured, but there's not really, it feels like, too much of an excuse for him not panning out, other than him just not being the guy. And there were a lot of question marks surrounding him headed into the draft process. I actually did sort of like some of the potential with him, but I mean, San Francisco, their issue was the fact that it never seemed like Shanahan was fully bought in on him in general. And, he had the weapons around him, so if he was going to be a good quarterback, he could have worked out. Brock Purdy has in that exact same system, and he was not seen to at least have anywhere near the ceiling that Lance did headed into that draft. But that being said, there was a whole lot of drama in terms of which decision makers in the 49ers organization wanted Lance. Mac Jones was a name that was thrown out there for a bit as well. Maybe it was a smokescreen, but I don't think that Shanahan was ever the biggest fan of Trey Lance from day one. All of this to be said, I just feel like when it comes to this year's upcoming draft, where, there are a bunch of these teams that are going to be in potential situations, I would say that outside of the top three, and there are going to be teams that are looking to sort of satisfy that quarterback need immediately. And granted, some of the teams that are potentially being talked about to move up do have some more legitimate weapons than any of those teams from 2021 did. The Raiders are being talked about. They have Michael Mayer, who they just drafted last year, the tight end out of Notre Dame. Of course, they have Devontae Adams. The Vikings have Justin Jefferson. But again, just sort of understand, the Saints are a team too where I feel like they are a ways away from, being Super Bowl contenders. I know that a lot of Saints fans weren't happy with Derek Carr this past season, but I do feel like it's a risk to give up extra assets as well to go get a quarterback. But, we'll see. The NFL draft is on Thursday. We're going to be coming to you with a whole bunch of coverage surrounding that as the week pushes on here and as these NFL rosters sort of fall into place. But that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Check us out on social media, and we are live every weekday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. We will be back tomorrow afternoon, and we will see you then. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to